What was something fairly small that made you feel betrayed by your significant other? We were going through airport security together. She went first, and when she was being screened, pointed at me and said, "Make sure you check my boyfriend. He always has weapons." As a joke, and then I got detained for a search and questioning and almost missed the flight. And no, I didn't have any weapons or other stuff on me. Then she got mad at me for almost missing our flight. Like, what did you think would happen here, Emily? She sounds like an idiot. Who jokes with airport security? Story 2. The most extreme case I know of is my dad and the girlfriend he had before my mom came along. He and the girlfriend were high school sweethearts and had been together for 3 years. They both wanted to see Back to the Future too, a movie that had been highly anticipated for years. They had a family emergency the day it came out, so they agreed to see it the following Monday. They found out from friends she went to see it with a guy friend my dad never really liked. He was so hurt, and she was so unapologetic. Her attitude was, "I'll go see it with you too, why did I have to wait?" Even though they'd agreed to see it together, he told her they needed to take a break. He fully meant for it to be temporary, just until he cooled off, but then he met my mom when he went to see the movie by himself, and he never looked back. He does feel a bit guilty though, because his ex was pretty devastated when she found out he'd met someone else and wanted to end things for good. Story 3. It's small, but one year we were both working 15 to 18-hour days, but had Thanksgiving off. I planned the menu, he didn't give input. I ordered the ingredients online during my lunch break to pick up after work because I didn't have time to shop. I woke up early, made everything, cleaned the dishes in the kitchen after. All he did was complain. I made too much. I had too much wine. 3 glasses over 7 hours. After all that work and not even a compliment or a thank you? Yeah, we divorced. That was our last Thanksgiving together. Story 4. I had recently married my now ex-wife. We were moving overseas for a few years after I finished up some training for the Air Force. She wanted to visit some family several states away, so I told her to do that while I finished the training and we'd meet up afterwards. My father's birthday was during this period. I got him a card, signed it, and then mailed it to her for her to sign and send it to him. Pre-addressed, postage paid, and all she had to do was sign and drop it in the mail. I finished training, fly out to meet her, and guess what's laying in the floorboard of her car on the passenger side? Story 5. I had a friend who dumped his girlfriend when he overheard her making fun of his, admittedly, rather nerdy, sister to her friends. He said it wasn't just about loyalty to his sis. It was about not wanting to be with someone who has to put others down to feel better about herself. I always thought it was admirable. Bruh, that's so messed up. He did the right thing. Story 6. My husband and friends finally talked me into taking a break and going on a hiking weekend with the girls during a long, busy stretch of working overtime and being caregiver to my mom in long-term care and my aunt in palliative care. I went, but touched base with my husband briefly each of the 3 days. I even talked to him the last day to say that we were considering an extra hike that would make us late coming home. Several hours after I got home late and was in bed, around 11 p.m., he thought to tell me that my aunt's doctor had phoned just after I had left on the Friday to say the end was near. I was stunned that he hadn't told me earlier. I would have come or at least called the doctor. Because it was so late and I knew there would only be one staff member on the floor, I decided to wait and call in the morning. Yes, she passed away before then. Sure, he just forgot to tell me about a call, but after 94 years on this earth, my aunt passed away alone. Story 7. My girlfriend knew that her sister was cheating on her boyfriend. She had been cheating for at least 6 months. Meanwhile, I had been reassuring this dude, the sister's boyfriend, that he was being paranoid and his girlfriend was completely devoted to him. At least that's the impression I got from her. My girlfriend knew I was reassuring this dude and fully approved of it. When I found out her sister was cheating, my girlfriend knew her sister was cheating, had lied about it, and had allowed me to mislead this guy. I was very hurt. She said it wasn't her place to tell, and frankly, it wasn't her business or my business. I had to break up with her. I couldn't be with someone who felt that comfortable with infidelity within a relationship. She thought I was overreacting to something that had nothing to do with us. I don't know. Maybe I was. All I know is that I didn't feel comfortable with her anymore. Story 8. When I was married about 5 years in and far from home, I got to work and my car battery went out. I called my husband at the time because I needed help. I needed help because I had no idea how to replace the battery and needed a ride to go buy a new one. It still confuses me to this day. He said, "I'm off work, but I'm heading out to go hunting. Go have your work friends help you." And he refused to come help me. I never felt so alone and worthless. Like, if my mom called my dad, he'd be there in minutes. If I was home, I could have called buddies in different counties even, and they'd be there to help me. But he absolutely refused to come help. It was the beginning of the time where if I had any self-esteem, I should have clearly seen the signs of continued cruelty and divorced him. Story 9. My ex-husband would tell me he was going to plan a date for us after I would beg him to take on the mental load of planning something nice for me rather than me doing it for him every time. He would talk up the date he was planning for days. When the day would come and we're getting ready to get in the car, he would say, "Where do you want to eat?" Not only did he not plan a date ahead of time, but then he put the mental load of figuring it out on me right as we were leaving. And after we would go back and forth on where to eat as we were driving, there he would suggest every restaurant we drove past instead of where we chose to go. It was insanely frustrating. Story 10. My wife made a snide remark about my niece checking herself into the mental ward at the hospital because she could feel an episode coming on and didn't feel like she should be unsupervised at the time. My wife also suffers with mental health issues and, I thought she would understand this kind of stuff. I drove my niece to the hospital and walked her in myself and made sure she got checked in okay. Story 11. I spent our entire marriage managing him, making his appointments, getting him places on time, making sure thank you notes were written and bills were paid, cleaning the house, caring for the baby, doing the dishes, reminding him to brush his teeth, and so on. I finally got burned out and divorced him. A couple of years later, when discussing an autism screening, he has every sign of autism. He said, "I'm just not going to get tested since it has no adverse effect in my life so far." The divorce meant nothing. Running me into the ground meant nothing. Happy ending, I'm married to a man who manages himself. The kid's 16 and has at least ADHD, if not autism, and I'm teaching him good habits, like cleaning and brushing his teeth. Story 12. We had our first date in the super cute pub in a super cute town. Then, over the next few years, that pub was our spot. When we got married, we had our wedding reception there. Several years later, living several hours away from that town, my husband tells me he's going to go stay with his friend in that town because the pub is shutting down and they're going to have one last hurrah. I already had plans that weekend I couldn't get out of, but I was never invited. My husband is usually super considerate, so I was pretty taken aback and still feel hurt about it. Story 13. Not me, but my wife. The guy she was with before me was buddy-buddy with her parents to the point he wasn't always on her team. Her parents liked to pick on her, and he would actually join in on it at times and join the laughing. Even he wouldn't stick up for her. She tells me she still remembers fondly the first time her stepdad made some jab. I don't remember the specifics. Saying something like, "Oh, she must do that all the time. Oh, dark spowls, barrel rolls." And my response was, "No, she's never done that. I only play for one team, my wife's team." Story 14. I knew a guy who ended an engagement because he found out his brother had kissed his fiancée and she hadn't told him. She told him nothing happened. She pushed him away. It never happened again. But she didn't tell him because she didn't want to ruin his relationship with his brother. He believed her, but he said he couldn't trust her. I never really agreed with that decision because I totally got where she was coming from when she didn't tell him. They were a good couple, too. It was sad to see them part ways. Story 15. He would go to the grocery together and he would immediately split away from me, get his items, check out, and then wait after the register or outside the building for me to finish. I can't explain it, but that really angered me off. My current boyfriend walks through all the aisles with me, and I really appreciate the extra company and time with him. It makes a mundane task much more enjoyable. Story 16. My boyfriend and I had a dog who had problems and needed surgery. There was a small chance it could have made her fecally incontinent. My boyfriend said, "We'll obviously have to put her down if that happens." She had surgery, came home and crapped herself. I called him at work, sobbing and panicked. When he came home that night, he screamed at me for bothering him at work. It made me feel so unsupported and set aside. The dog was fine. She and I moved out and lived many more happy years together. Story 17. I'll often make fun of myself for the sake of making my wife laugh. We have this running joke that I'm a girly man because I cry during movies and I enjoy musicals, etc. It's all fun and games when we joke about this at home, but one time we were out with our friends and she referred to me as a princess in front of them. Maybe I'm being insecure. It's never a problem when we joke at home, but for some reason it felt insulting in front of her friends. I laughed it off in the moment, but I pulled her aside later and told her I didn't appreciate being made fun of publicly like that. I guess it's because I felt this was our little inside joke and I was being vulnerable for the sake of making her laugh. But when everyone is in on the joke, it feels like I'm not making people laugh anymore. They're just laughing at me. Story 18. When my ex apartment sat for me, I told him not to invite anyone over without my permission. He invited his best friend over and lied about it. I said, "If I asked best friend, what would she say?" Then I texted her asking for her to lie to me. She came over literally just to bake a dessert. I would have been annoyed that he crossed a boundary, but it bothered me even more that he would go so far as to get his friends to lie to me. It was so upsetting to see that they'd be willing to do it. Story 19. My ex lied about going to a garage sale. I'd been really trying to find things for us to do together because we were obviously disconnected at that point and there was a big estate sale. I told him we ought to go after work and he agreed. He then said he had to work late. When he got home, he didn't feel like going, but later after he started his nightly drinking, admitted he hadn't worked late. He'd gone without me and picked up some tools and just didn't want to go back. That was about a week before I made the decision to divorce. It definitely wasn't the only reason, but one of many. Story 20. Luckily, I find the story hilarious, but I'll never let my husband forget it. We were playing Mario Party Superstars with two friends and we were playing the Spaceland map. My husband used double dice to intentionally run through the countdown in the center space so that the laser hit me and I lost all my coins. He swears he thought the countdown had one extra number. He bought me dinner that night. Story 21. I had been telling my boyfriend for months that my absolute dream day was going stargazing. More than anything, I wanted to go out and see the stars at a night sky preservation area. I'd go out to the marina near us with a buddy and I'd beg said buddy to let us stay a few minutes more so I could look at the sky a little longer. It got to the point that my family and friends joked that I should be an astronaut because I loved looking at the constellations so much. One of my dream jobs is to teach astronomy at a school. I'm studying to be a teacher. My boyfriend asked what my dream date was by a close friend of ours. He said something along the lines of a picnic in the morning and walking around. No, man, that's not my dream date. That's just something I might do in my spare time, and even then, it's still kind of boring. I'm still hurt when I think about that, to be honest. No idea how he just didn't listen for years on that. Story 22. The one thing that got me good was that she was insistent in sharing her favorite music or YouTube videos or interests with me, and I would always watch and try to get interested so we can enjoy them together. But whenever I tried to share something with her, she would never look in my direction and make fun of me for liking things I liked. The thing was, this was my first girlfriend and I just assumed this is normal, so I accidentally just stopped sharing anything I'm interested in with all my future relationships by mistake. Because I thought my interests were weird and they would judge me. Oops. Story 23. After the birth of my first child, she had a round of colic for 2 weeks, and my ex and I were alternating the night shift. I would take care of her during the days, and every other night he would do the night feedings. One time I was up from 5 a.m. until 5 p.m. the next day. So I had a crying baby for 36 hours with no sleep, and I hadn't eaten much all day. I was so exhausted and frustrated with the crying, and I asked my ex to go get us pizza. The pizza place was 5 minutes away, so I expected him to be back in 20 minutes. And then I was looking forward to sleeping after that. He didn't return for over an hour, so I called him what the hell? And he had eaten his portions of the pizza there at the shop and then drove over to his friend's house and was hanging out with him for a few minutes before his night shift with the baby. It was so inconsiderate and really set the pace for the rest of our relationship. It went just like that for 5 years until I finally dumped him. Story 24. I had a friend that was going through some serious health stuff. My wife was texting with his wife, getting updates. They're best friends, grew up together. She hands me the phone to read the texts about what was going on, so I'm scrolling up and reading them when I get to the beginning of the conversation. I notice there's a picture that was sent to her of me bending down playing with her daughter a day or two before. So I scroll up a little farther and see her making callous remarks about my thinning hair. I scrolled back to the bottom and gave her the phone back. I never said anything to her about it, and she still doesn't know I saw it. It hurts because I would never do or say things like that regarding anything with her appearance. I know my hair is thinning on top as I get older, but I never had an issue with it until that moment. Now I always wear a hat. Wait till her hair is thinning. It happens to women too. Story 25. He got me a household item that I didn't ask for or want and that he uses often for my birthday, the day of my birthday. Shortly after that, it was Christmas and he didn't get me anything at all and suggested very late in the evening that maybe he could pay for me to do something if I wanted. He literally didn't even think about getting me a single thing or even planning anything for me when I plan his birthday every year. For clarity, he has never planned a birthday for me and is happy to let the day go by without comment. This year, I'm not getting him crap, and I'm not planning crap for him. Story 26. This happened years ago, but I never forget it. My significant other and I had season passes to Disneyland. I'm 120 pounds and my body does not regulate temperature well. If I get cold enough, my lips turn blue and my fingers start feeling like pins and needles. After spending the day there, that night it had gone really cold and I wasn't expecting it, so I did not bring a sweater. I asked him if I could buy one. Of course, they were expensive and he said he wasn't going to pay for that much for a sweater. So I was freezing the rest of the night, especially on the tram back to the car. By the time we got to the car, I was shivering pretty violently. I was also in sandals. A couple of months later, it is colder and he forgets his jacket. He goes in and buys one. He's a lot bigger than me and almost never gets cold. He can deal with a cold though, and it takes him a lot to get that cold. As he walked out and put on his sweater, he did not see that I was trying not to cry. I felt so betrayed. He knew how cold I had been and my problem with temperature, but because it wasn't cold, he assumed I was just being dramatic, I guess. Story 27. My most recent birthday was a disaster. My husband and I had been trying to get a relationship back on track after his cheating, among other things. I'm not big on birthdays, but I told him that there was something specific that I wanted that year. There was a local bakery that I frequented as a kid that closed when I was in high school. The owners reopened the bakery about 10 years after the original closed. I was so happy. I called them to ask if they still made a particular type of cupcake that I bought all the time as a kid. They did. So I told my husband that is what I wanted for my birthday, a dozen of those cupcakes. That is the only thing I asked for. The day before my birthday, I asked him when would the cupcakes need to be picked up. He looked at me like I had two heads. He forgot. I called the bakery right then and ordered the cupcakes, but couldn't pick them up until a few days after my birthday because it was a custom order that they needed on time. I picked them up and paid for them myself. Most disappointing birthday ever. I asked for so little. Story 28. Me and my significant other, or LDR, we call each other every night for daily updates. Whenever there's a problem with my earphones, like static or mic problems, I try to solve it right away. Sometimes I even buy new earphones, even though my current one is still functioning well, just for the sake of his hearing comfort. But whenever the problem is on his end, he makes a little to no effort to fix it. I even endured a month of static communication in his end, and when I had enough, I used the magic word please. Yes, he threw the earphones, but now we're talking on speakerphone and I hear everything. Lol. Feel betrayed with the lack of effort. He can afford to buy a new one. He works at DOST. Even has spare earphones he uses when he travels at work with his motorcycle. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 29. I had a wonderful significant other who lived in Canada. I live in California. It was a long-distance relationship. I loved her more than anything. I've also never really been around snow. So during one visit to Canada, it snowed. I was ecstatic. I begged her to have a snowball fight. She declined, saying that they're dumb and she didn't like that kind of thing. I was sad, but let it go. After returning to Cali while on a Skype call with her, she excitedly tells about a snowball fight she just had with her friends. I was dumbfounded, because she was so adamant about how she hated snowball fights. I felt like I was second fiddle and couldn't understand why she'd do that with him, but not me. I miss her to this day, but I don't know if I'll forget that part of the trip. Story 30. I used to be on the volunteer board of a nonprofit soccer club. A crazy soccer mom didn't like a decision by the board about next year's teams, going to birth year rather than school year, and that my kid was going to continue playing up in an older level team. This soccer mom screamed at me on the sidelines of a game. It was a little unhinged, yelling that the only reason my kid got special treatment was because I was on the board. If she's not that good, and etc. Apparently, it didn't matter that she was not only the fastest kid in that team, but also the fastest in her whole school, boys included. Because of my position on the board, I decided not to get into it with her, but I was shocked and upset. This woman insulted me and my daughter. I told my husband all about the encounter. A few people checked in on me later, and her husband apologized when he heard about it. At the next week's game, my husband is on the sidelines, chatting to her like old friends. No big deal. Story 31. He rearranged a cupboard. Sounds stupid, but I was the only one that used that cupboard. It held food and spices, and I did 100% of the cooking. He rearranged it so that it looked better to him. While doing so, he hid some of the most used items in the back and put them on shelves I couldn't reach. I'll reiterate, he didn't use this cupboard. It finally hit me that his need to control every aspect of his and my environment would never change, and it wouldn't matter to him how it impacted me. I told him I can't reach the salt now, and his response was that he liked it better this way. It was too cluttered before. It blew my mind because, again, I did all of the cooking. I never once made a meal, and he could have gone his whole life without even opening that cupboard if it annoyed him the way I had set it up. But he needed to do what he wanted with it, even though it didn't really make a difference for him and made my life more difficult. Story 32. We were 19 or 20 at the time. My ex and I were long distance for a while. He was in the next state over for college. I was visiting him for a week, and he said he was going to take me on a nice dinner date, so I packed a nice dress and sandals, and I was so excited because we didn't go on dates very often. We're about to pull into the parking lot, and he goes, "Hey, I was actually wondering if you could pay tonight." For no particular reason. I was stunned and just agreed because he had anger issues and was a bit scared when we got into fights. It was just an Outback Steakhouse, so it wasn't crazy expensive. Another time, same ex. The birthday was within literally a week, and he asked what I wanted. Knowing, or so I thought, he didn't have much to spend. I just said he didn't have to get me anything and not to worry. He bought like a $700 puppy. Didn't even get me a card or flowers. So glad he's out of my life. Lol. Story 33. We've been playing the game of doorknob for almost 3 years, since we've known each other. We went backpacking over a weekend, and as he felt relaxed and connected and happy, he innocently let his guard down and flatulated so loudly, and for so long, that the bird stopped singing. Immediately, I called out, "Doorknob," and he realized his mistake, shouting, "No!" into the luscious, doorknobless scenery around us. Another 24 hours from civilization, I began hurting him, and he was helpless to stop me for the entire night, the entire next day, and the entire drive back into town, until he stopped at the first gas station that actually used doorknobs. Obviously, door handles don't count. Fast forward to our next backpacking trip a few months later. This one was 4 days. Much more dire consequences. I was determined to have my victory once more, so I played it cool, as though I had forgotten about the whole ordeal. At some point in the trip, I needed the first aid kit, which he keeps in the top of his backpack. Without thinking, he lets me go through his bag. To my horror, I find that he has been keeping an errant doorknob in his bag, ready and waiting until I doorknob him again. All so he can override my inevitable victory over him in the middle of the woods. I've never forgiven him for this, and I'm not really sure I ever will. Story 34. My sister and her 3-year-old had to come stay with us, my now ex-wife and I, for a 3 to 4 month period. It was not ideal, but it was not a vacation. Before my sister came, I advocated to rent her a place nearby. My ex insisted that it's not cool and that we must host family in our place. As soon as my sister came, my ex started the drama. "You're spending too much time with him. You're marginalizing me, etc." That was all within 3 days of my sister's arrival. And it was not a discussion, it was an explosion within 3 days of arrival. The context here is that my ex has a massive boundary, or lack thereof, with her family that I kept putting up with for years before that. My family and sister live abroad and we see them once every year at most. The drama continued. I kept managing until one day my ex got really upset at my sister for putting her laundry in the living room chair while she was doing laundry and before folding them. I felt forever betrayed. I'd put up with so much with her family and did so much to support her. And the one time I needed to be there for my family, she had no patience to support me nor courtesy for a guest. Could never recover from that, and now we are divorced. Story 35. It was my ex's birthday and we had dinner at a nice place. During dinner, I began to feel a little iffy. The feeling you feel when you suddenly realize the reason you've been so wiped out the last day or so is because you're getting sick. But I pushed through and we went to the movie I was extremely excited to see, Red Dawn Remake. When we sat down for the movie, I really began to feel horrible. I spiked a fever, felt woozy, and about a quarter of the way in, I had to run to the bathroom to retch. I was in there probably 15 minutes, retching the whole time. Finally, I was able to get to our car and I got in and I just kinda collapsed. I texted him. I was really sick and could barely move and felt dizzy. He didn't text back. Finally, after an hour or so, after the movie ends, he comes out and complains that he has to drive me home and then drive to also get our kids. Turns out I had strep throat and was really sick for about a week. Story 36. I went through a really bad period with my mental health a while back. Did the whole therapy thing, got placed on meds, and so on. Anyways, my boyfriend, who was one of the few people I felt comfortable being honest with about some of this stuff, would throw some of my struggles back in my face during arguments or even normal conversation, calling me paranoid or delusional, amongst other things. I'm not proud of many things I've accomplished, but the progress I made from my mental health is one of them. I went through hell and back with that. Anyways, a while back I expressed that it was hurtful to hear him say those things, and he told me to get over it. Anyone I've told tells me it's normal to say hurtful stuff during arguments. Yeah, I'm still pretty bummed about it. Story 37. I dated this man-child back in high school or early college who had a superiority complex. I think some of it stemmed from being a twin, as both of them were very smart, athletically gifted, and driven. It was the younger twin, by about 5 minutes, but it seemed like he always wanted to be number one. Anywho, one day we were looking through old school paperwork and found our gifted test scores, complete with IQ scores on them. My score was about 15 points higher than his, which he hated. He looked at me and straight up said, "Well, you certainly don't act like it." He was very gifted when it came to math and science. I swear the man could do differential equations in his head. I'm more creative and excel in English and history. Our brains just work differently, but we were both smart. I remember just looking at him and wanting to smack some sense into him, but held back. He was also obsessed with physical appearances. If I would have a snack-sized bag of chips as a snack, he would tell me we would need to run an extra 2 miles that day to burn it off. He broke up after nearly 2.5 years of nonsense. The emotional cruelty had me convinced I wasn't good enough, but I came to my senses. Joke's on him, though. I went on to model for several surf or sports magazines and had a successful career in journalism and editing before having children. Story 38. I'm a massive music head.
I pretty much listen to music all day long unless I'm watching something. I was listening to some calm music quietly at like 9 p.m. and my ex completely lost her mind, slammed my laptop shut and started yelling about how she didn't want to hear music at nighttime. She could have asked me calmly to turn it off. I would have. Reasonable. At the time, she was unemployed and not looking for jobs. Not like she had anywhere to be in the morning. I just felt duped because she made it seem like she was a music head too, but I soon learned she hardly gave a crap about music. Story 39. He told me he had quit smoking, early 2000s. We had friends over and I was sitting outside with them while they had a smoke. They said something about my partner not coming outside for a smoke, and I said he had quit 6 months ago and how proud I was of him. 20 years later, I can still distinctly remember the look of confusion on their faces before they said he had been smoking the weekend before. I didn't doubt him for a second and said they must have been mistaken. They didn't look convinced, but they shrugged and we moved on. They must have said something to him, though, as a few days later he confessed. He's only stopped smoking for around a week. He was, quote, too hard, so he kept smoking and just pretended to me he had quit. I didn't really say anything, but it broke something inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal, but that I had defended him, so I also felt embarrassed. Story 40. We aren't together anymore, but back when my ex and I were together, we had both discussed marriage. I knew it was probably approaching given our situation because we discussed it a lot before. What stung for me, though, was that he went online and bought two $30 candles that were those special kinds that come with surprises inside. They had teeny tiny, like sand grain sized diamonds inside them that you got once they melted to a certain point. If you bought enough candles and collected a certain number, you could ship them back to the company and they'd put them in a cheap brass ring for free. That's how he planned on getting my engagement ring. And honestly, it broke my heart. He made pretty good money and paid like $1,200 in expenses a month. I pay more than that now as a single mother, and I don't even make the money he makes. It broke my heart that he couldn't actually get off his back and get me a nice engagement ring and instead chose some cheap male BS. I don't know. Maybe I'm just stuck up, but that really hurt me. Story 41. My mom stayed with my dad since she was 16. She was a teenager and knew a little about life. My father at the time had a wife and 4 kids. One was still in the wife's tummy. My mom ran away with him to a faraway city. He left his wife. My mom left her whole family. My mom loved him so much, she put him ahead of all the kids. Small example, anything delicious he would be the first to taste and to have, he would take it as it should be. My father took her kindness for granted and never stopped looking for girls. My bedroom was next to theirs, and many nights I overheard him sweet-talking to other women. Spent a lot of money online watching girls and spent my mom's money on real estate investments, which turned out to be failures. They were in their 60s and 70s last year. My mom passed away. My father refused to see her in her last minutes and refused to be present when we buried her. His words, "He does not feel good enough the last year because my mom did not spend enough time with him. He sits in a wheelchair now and requests 24-hour care. Sorry, this is not small. After reading some posts, I just can't help it. I still cry every day for my mom." Story 42. Music was a big reason my ex-husband and I connected in the first place. We were only 15 and 16 at the time of meeting, but his eyes lit up when he realized I listened to Slipknot. Over a decade goes by, we get married, things are lovely. He gets an intern at work. He asked her what she was listening to one day and got excited because it was a metal song. He tells me about this and I give him some suggestions for her to listen to. No biggie. A year or two later, I happened to see one of his playlists on Spotify with some kind of inappropriate name. I opened it and realized it was a playlist they shared together. We didn't even have a playlist we shared. I didn't know it felt like a betrayal after all. I gave him suggestions back in the day. It just kind of felt like I was getting replaced a little bit. Turns out my gut was right to feel a bit sad. He eventually had an affair with her and divorced me to be with her. Story 43. At my mother's wake, he left early because it was happy hour at the club. Can't miss that, can you? He also thought I was dwelling on things too much, and this is his way of helping. His mother had passed away a few years earlier, and I was very supportive of him in the time he needed to grieve, which included leaving his job and me having to return to work much sooner than planned. I just had our baby. But when my mother passed away, he expected me to continue working and act like nothing happened. Everyone passes away, you know. You can't let these things get to you. Story 44. This year was my first Mother's Day as a mom myself, and I'd hoped he would do something thoughtful for me, even a sweet handwritten card with his and our son's name on it. He not only didn't do anything for me, aside from the dishes, but we also spent no time together and I didn't get so much as a hug. I spent the day caring for our 11-month-old son on my own as usual while he played video games. I later also found out that he told his mother he didn't do anything for me because I would have just gotten mad at him if he spent money on anything, which has never happened and makes me look like an asshole to his family. Plus, he spends all of his money on himself all the time and I've never yelled at him. It was a major disappointment, to say the least. Story 45. Wow,
I just felt betrayed by my significant other for something stupidly small yesterday, and now this question pops up. Almost creepy. Context. So after dinner, I always clear off the table, clean up the kitchen, and put everything in the dishwasher. Because my wife cooks, I always leave the coasters on the table and ask her to throw them from where she's sitting to the kitchen. It's a stupid little ritual that brings me joy. So yesterday, I do as I always do and leave the coasters on the table. I'm in the kitchen and ask her to throw the coasters, and she's like, "Nah, I don't feel like it." So I'm like, "Oh, come on. I really enjoy that part of the cleanup." And she insists that she doesn't feel like it. The thing itself was small, and that's what makes it feel like betrayal. I could never imagine myself refusing to do something that requires an insignificant amount of time and effort on my part if I knew it brought joy to her. Story 46. A few months before her dog passed, she was dealing with a lot of health issues and had lost the use of her back legs. She was often sore and in pain, and it was hard timing when to let her go. There was a lot of bad days, but I convinced myself that the few sparse good days meant she was still hanging on. I dedicated a solid 6 weeks of my life to almost exclusively taking care of her. I'd sleep only a few hours a day because she'd wake up and be disoriented, and I wanted to make sure I was nearby to take her out or just provide comfort with treats or pets. I was exhausted physically and mentally. It definitely seeped into my day-to-day life, but it was worth it for my best friend. Accidents in the house had become more common as she lost the use of the lower half of her body and didn't always realize when she needed to go out. One day I was cleaning her up after one of these accidents, and she snarled and bit me for the first time ever. She was almost 15. It absolutely broke my heart, and I've never had a person or animal make me feel that distraught and hurt since. I know or knew it wasn't her fault, but the shock paired with the exhaustion pushed me over the edge. Story 47. When my ex-husband would cook or get food, if there were two ways or something could be done, we both wanted different things. 100% of the time, he would get his way and I would not. Example, I like brothy soup. When he made soup, it was always thick like stew. I was always doing the thing everyone else preferred. And it made me feel unseen and uncredited about that he would never choose to give to my preference. I would even ask sometimes specifically, and he'd say he'd like it better the other way. They did that one year when he made my birthday cookie. He would also overcook steak, knowing I like it medium rare. And every time, if I got a steak that was what I wanted, it's because he undercooked them all, and I grabbed one before he got to the grill. It gets to a point you start to know it's not accidental. Story 48. My ex called me annoying. I know, not a big deal. But this was a while ago, and I had very bad feelings about myself in general at this time. Pretty much anyone I ever got close enough to show my real self eventually called me annoying. It broke my heart every time someone did that. It was like confirmation that people were only ever putting up with me rather than actually enjoying my presence in their lives. It shut me down completely when he said it. We'd been together 4 years and never once did he call me annoying. It was actually, stupidly, a big deal to me and made me feel like maybe he understood me better than others. I never looked at him the same. Story 49. This was my first live-in partner that didn't last, and he did 100 big things. But one small thing was on my birthday. He got called into work and said yes. They called him all the time, and he had a choice. He also ditched me on New Year's Eve a few hours before the midnight kiss thing. I went to a friend's place and got really spiked. When he got back, everyone got hammered, but I couldn't drink. I felt really lonely even though I was surrounded by people. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.